Hey, Jannine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is great to have you. Are you in Brooklyn, right?
I am indeed
Is that
enjoying the last of summer. Yeah.
yes? Oh my gosh. And I'm in Houston, so we are enduring the last of summer. We
hmm
are.
hmm
You open the door, it's like you literally are walking into an oven.
Yeah.
Brutal.
I know. It's actually been really lovely here. So it feels like nice respite to be able to get outside and enjoy some greenery.
Yes. That's actually a topic we haven't covered on the show yet is like nature therapy. If any of you
Mm.
listeners, if you specialize in health and wellness that's based in nature, holler, send us a DM. We want to interview you. Well, Jannine, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. You are working on a topic that our listeners are very interested in. But before we get into your company, I want to talk about you. What is your background? Where are you from? What did you study? Where did you work? And how did you end up here?
Sure. Well, it's been, sort of a non-linear journey, which I always appreciate hearing about others' kind of funky journeys, because I started out really with a passion for the humanities. I was an international relations and history major, but I came from a family which is a huge part of the influences that have shaped what my passions are. A family of physicians. Both of my parents are doctors, and I'm one of three girls. And so women's health is just sort of always in the ether, always at the dinner table. I'll probably come back to that, but originally, I was born in the UK. You can't tell, unfortunately. I have lost that accent after, gosh, like I won't say how many decades in the US, but I have a special place in my heart for the UK, and I went back to live there as a professional, working at Google years later. But northern New Jersey is what I consider home. I grew up in sort of a semi-rural area not too far from New York City, and stayed in the Northeast for undergrad, and then actually went to India to do a Fulbright scholarship where I was focused on microfinance and helping understand and do research into women's businesses supported by microfinance, microcredit. It was right around when Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Prize, which was a fantastic experience. And one of the big learnings from that, which I think also was pretty foundational for me, was that when you're thinking about international development and what changes the trajectory of people's lives and lifts people out of poverty, is it's not just any one thing, like access to capital, that can be very important, but it's oftentimes that access to capital plus access to healthcare and education, and how all of these foundational sort of social programs and resources fit together. And I think that is part of what got me thinking about healthcare in a different way. I spent a few years at Google. I was in California and back in the UK working on product marketing. These were kind of the early days of Google marketing, when YouTube was pretty nascent. And the big question was, is Google ever going to be able to make money on YouTube? I mean, it seems like such a
Oh my
funny
God.
question. I worked for the chief marketing officer there, and it was a fantastic kind of moment in the internet when Google did its first Super Bowl ad, and I got to be involved in helping to shape and build that team.
Whoa, you are so
Yeah.
cool.
I don't
Wow.
I was not cool, but I got very lucky and got exposed to that world pretty early. Fast forward a few years, I went to business school, and I was really thinking about healthcare and tech and where the two come together. And it was especially thinking about mental health at that time. And remember having with one of my classmates some, interviews with venture capitalists in Boston. I was at Harvard Business School, and being kind of laughed out of the room, like, mental health, like there's no money in that, no business model.
Yeah. God
Digital
forbid it was
health and mental health.
women's mental health is even more.
I
That's
mean,
so niche. Who would
I
pay
don't
for
think we would have
that?
been in the room, like, let
Yeah.
alone left out of it. Um, but I was thinking a lot about health and tech at that time, and it was 2012. There was a lot of interesting work coming out of, the ACA and Obamacare, and I ended up having the opportunity to go and work in the Obama White House, and then stayed on as a political appointee in the last part of the Obama administration, which was sort of like
Obama. Did you meet
pardon
Obama?
Me?
Do you know Obama?
I wish. No, I did get a hug from Michelle Obama once. She hugged every single summer fellow. Yeah. And she's, just incredible in a small group, intimate setting in front of millions of people on TV. Like and with her Menopause podcast, it all ties back together.
Yes. When I saw that she did an episode on menopause, I was like, oh my God, y'all, if Michelle Obama is talking about it, we are onto it. Like
Totally. And little did I know that, I would be sort of referencing this down the road. But anyway.
Sorry to interrupt you. I heard Obama.
No. Yeah. Fangirl. Totally. Coming out of public service, having had this management role in the government, learning to get things done in what can be a challenging environment, went back into the startup space with an eye to digital health, which had really at this point taken off. That whole 2012 to 2016 run up was pretty incredible in terms of the companies that emerged. And I worked with a number of digital health startups, helping early stage companies sort of shape their strategy and business development, and then joined Cityblock Health, which I'm not sure how much your listeners know about, but it's a successful New York-based startup that really focuses on individuals who live in poor communities who have complex medical needs and complex social needs, and how those things interact to really drive poor health. And so that was an amazing experience. Cityblock grew very quickly. And at some point I sort of realized that the thing that I wanted to focus on a lot more, as I was, steeped in the clinical operations of this business in care delivery, digital product, in-home, brick and mortar clinics, but we weren't really, at that point, Cityblock wasn't focused on women's health specifically. And I felt like there was so much opportunity for new and interesting models in women's health. And so I started thinking more about that and exploring the space. And there was, these companies that were cropping up and doing fantastic work, but mostly focused on the reproductive window. And, and I know that this has been covered in this podcast, so I won't belabor it, but it struck me that, there was a lot that happens in women's health and in women's lives outside of the fertility window. And we just don't really talk about it. It's sort of like crickets. It's, and that's a shame. And part of the reason that struck me was because my father is a urogynecologist. And so his area has always been overactive bladder, which is, as you know, a major symptom of menopause. And so, thinking through that, and then being introduced to my now co-founder through a friend, Alessandra Henderson, who's incredible. And she had already started Elektra Health. And so I joined her last summer. She had been at it for, the better part of 6+ months. And we sort of joined forces to build a company that would help women navigate this journey through menopause. And our mission is to smash the taboo around menopause and to really empower women with access to evidence-based care and education and community.
Incredible. Why did you pick menopause instead of like contraception or menstrual hygiene? What was the draw to menstruation, or was it just that you loved women's health and you met Alessandra and said, oh, you're doing menopause? Okay.
Yeah, I know it's a good question. I mean, I looked at the landscape and was really thrilled to see that there were interesting companies cropping up around, cycle tracking and contraception. And it really felt like there was this huge void around this huge market. Yeah. So, women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, oftentimes earlier, if they've gone through surgical menopause or, medically induced menopause, and so little out there, not even in terms of digital health, but even in terms of, what we think of as like traditional healthcare, just sort of resources. And expertise that's really hard to access. And so I think that was really, really compelling. And of course, this is sort of like random, but because of my parents and some of the folks that they had worked with and trained with, there are people in my life who have been in the menopause space. And so kind of getting to consult with experts, one of the founders of the British Menopause Society, who's like a luminary in the space, spoke at my wedding. So, it's just this total coincidence.
Yeah.
That, I think
talk about menopause at dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, like I remember when my mom was going through, experiencing symptoms of menopause. And even in this like safe space where we talked about vaginal health and menstrual health all the time, it was still like I remember, and I'm so like, I feel terrible now that, we were like, ugh, mom, like hot flashes, like it felt like a joke. And it's not a joke. So I think it, both personally and in terms of what we were seeing in the landscape, it was just this incredibly compelling space to do something new and to really help women over the course of, a long journning.
Yeah. So when did you meet Alessandra?
We met last summer in June. We were introduced through a mutual friend, and really no preface. It was, just kind of a coffee chat that turned into a many hours long conversation, and kind of that, kismet right away. So it was, we did a little bit of that founder dating that, you sometimes hear about. You're like, that kind of getting to know you, and both personally and professionally, and how do you like to work, and what drives you, and we have I think had been fortunate to find each other and have this really fantastic partnership that's deeply supportive. And you find out when you're running a startup in a pandemic that those things really matter.
Really, really matter. Absolutely. Yeah. So what does Elektra Health do for women?
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer women access to world-class experts in menopause medicine. So we have fantastic providers who provide virtual care, evidence-based virtual care, as well as education and resources. And we do this through a lot of group programming. Everything is virtual now, as well as fostering a supportive community, because so much of what we hear about is, I don't know what to expect. Like, am I in it? Somebody said this, I was speaking with a woman yesterday who was like, do I get it or am I in it? Like, do I get perimenopause or am I in perimenopause? And, not having any roadmap or knowing whom to talk to or where to seek out resources. We want to be that sort of destination and partner to a woman on the long term, or over the long term in her journey.
That's a very common FemTech company feature, is a community aspect. Even if, what I'm hearing is you provide like telehealth services. I'm sure we're going to hear more about that, but you didn't need to have a community aspect, but so often successful FemTech companies do, because we are addressing topics that women literally need basic education on because no one told us, and we live in a society where it's not normal or, common to talk about these things at Starbucks, just at the counter or whatever. So yeah, that community aspect, I'm so glad that y'all have included that. How do you know if a physician specializes in menopause?
Well, we've been really fortunate to work with our founding physician, Dr. Anna Barbieri, who's board certified and also did a fellowship in integrative medicine. So she really has focused in her practice increasingly on women's gynecological needs and hormonal health needs in the midlife phase, and bringing a holistic approach to her care. She's certified by the North American Menopause Society. And we have a group of fantastic medical advisors, including Dr. Lila Noctegal, who was a former president of the North American Menopause Society, which is
Wow.
sort of gold standard for medical research in the space. And so those affiliations with NAMS and really getting referrals from other physicians and providers of, hey, this provider is steeped in menopause and they love working with women. Oftentimes it's sort of like women in midlife, which I'm putting in quotes for people who can't see me because it seems like such an unfortunate moniker. Yeah. But, we get a lot of physicians who are attracted to us because the mission resonates with them in terms of what they see in their practice, and they really would love to be able to do more for women around counseling and education and access to treatment, because many women aren't aware that there is actually a great range of solutions out there, and they may not get that from their primary care doc or even their OBGYN for a whole host of reasons. But we do look for to work with providers. So if you're out there and you're practicing menopause medicine and you'd like to, get involved with Elektra, we'd be thrilled to do something together.
What are some of the treatments available? Because I know like the common one is hormone replacement, and like that has its own side effects and its own stuff. So what are some treatments? And I would also love it if you told us some about the integrative treatments. What are examples of those?
Yeah, so it sort of gets to the way that Elektra has built its philosophy of care. So we really are focused on integrative care, the whole person, rather than just sort of one part of the body, one aspect of anatomy, because there are estrogen receptors all over the body, and what women experience as they go through the transition is everything from dramatic changes to the physiology and emotionally, and even on a sort of a spiritual or identity level. And so to take care of women in the space of life is to really think about all of those things. Yeah. We often start with thinking about what a woman's goals are. And so treatments have to be sort of tailored to and personalized to what a woman is experiencing, what phase of the journey she's on, and what really bothers her most. And depending on what it is, then you can, address the specific interventions to that. Oftentimes starts with lifestyle. So, as everyone knows, sleep, which can be really challenging. It can be, insomnia is a common symptom of menopause. But thinking about how do you optimize your sleep, how do you get more of it, how do you really pay attention to it, and what you eat. So as metabolism changes in this phase of life, often women notice that there's changes in their body around weight in their abdomen, and thinking critically about what you eat and perhaps changing that and incorporating different types of, maybe you're someone who's worked out in a particular way for decades, but in this phase of life, you might need to actually shift that, shift the mix to higher intensity or more weight-bearing exercise because of the way your body is changing. So lifestyle is always a bucket that we start with. Okay. And then we think about what supplements have evidence behind them. Mm-hmm. Some have decent evidence. Some have, honestly, like the evidence is lacking. And one of the great things about Dr. Barbieri's expertise is she is able to, she's on top of all of the latest research in this space and able to identify what supplements make sense. So black cohosh is often mentioned, and there are, a whole range of others. And then in terms of pharmacological treatments, there are hormonal and non-hormonal treatments, and it depends on really what the symptom is. I'll just spend a second on hormone replacement therapy or hormone therapy. It comes by several names. I think oftentimes it has this poor reputation because of a big study that was done in 2002 and sort of hit the press and was misinterpreted in some ways, and then has been subsequently sort of re-examined by researchers, and that work has been, many studies have been done to follow up and find that for many women, most of the time, if you have severe symptoms of menopause, HRT can be beneficial and safe. And it really depends on the personal history and of course, like the personal level of comfort, because as with any medication or any supplement, there can be downsides. And so that's where you really get into conversations with providers who know what they're talking about and have really dug deep into the space. And then there are, yeah, sorry.
I have never, I guess when I think to myself, well, why do I have this paradigm that hormone replacement therapy for women in menopause is bad? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I've just heard it. So you're saying that there was a study in 2002 that potentially said it was bad, and then everyone just kind of latched onto it. Because I'm sure before, I was born in 91. I doubt I talked or learned about menopause before 2002. So I probably have just grown up in this society that said it was bad. So can you tell me more about the history of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, in the 90s, HRT was prescribed to a large proportion of menopausal women. So that was, I believe, in the arena of like 45%. And then there was a study done under the Women's Health Initiative, and those results were initially published in 2002. And those findings suggested a higher risk of breast cancer and heart disease and blood clots in association with HRT. And it sort of hit the press right away. And kind of overnight, women and their physicians stopped prescribing it and stopped taking it. And, there are many nuances around the issues with the study, but, in short, some of the criticisms were that findings around specific types of HRT were generalized to all women and all hormones. So sort of painting with that very broad brush. And the age of the women in the study were on average older and less healthy at a baseline than what some would consider typical users. So, there were sort of research has found, and the Women's Health Initiative has subsequently kind of gone back and done new and more research on it, and found that it is considered to be the gold standard treatment for the symptoms of menopause. It is safe and effective for menopausal women with significant symptoms if they start it within a certain window of time. But the fear around it has sort of really prevented many women and many physicians from considering it or researching it. But we do find that women are very intrigued and want to learn about it. But oftentimes are wanting to, and I think it's part of this cultural zeitgeist that we're in, focus on natural solutions, quote unquote natural, because I think that's sometimes used as a marketing term.
GNC, you're like, it's natural, and you're like, actually, you know less about that vitamin than you do about that antibiotic. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you raise a really good point, and that's one of the things that we talk about a lot in terms of supplements, is that not all supplements are created equal, and that some have subjected themselves to pretty rigorous testing, and there are organizations that do that, third-party testing if you are looking for it. But how would you know?
Like most CBD products, they did an experiment, and they were like 75% of CBD products don't have CBD in it because there's no like regulatory around it yet. And it's So that's very interesting. As a scientist, as a geneticist, as a person who takes vaccines, I know the history of one bad study ruining it all. And so I have a deep respect, and I'm very open to shifting my paradigm. So thank you so much for walking us through that little history lesson there. Really interesting.
Sure. Look, I was just going to add one thing, which is, I think there's great research being done. We definitely need more of it. But the, research into the impact of estrogen is fascinating, in terms of brain health and bone health and heart health. And what, there are signs that it does actually decrease the risk of bone fractures and cardiovascular disease and diabetes and perhaps dementia. So there's really a rich space here to be dug into. We shouldn't just sort of write off, the estrogen and progesterone as we think about women's health in the long term.
Definitely. Can you tell us a bit more about what are some other integrative or natural solutions? I know you said supplements, and then there's like lifestyle. Are you also talking like acupuncture, or like, is that something you're talking about too?
There is some evidence around acupuncture. We do, we do recommend it sometimes, although in this era of the pandemic, that's been a little bit more challenging. But for some women, they do find it very effective. And I think the other thing that we spend a lot of time on is sort of mind-body connection, meditation, and intentional breathing, especially around hot flashes. So,
tell me about that.
So there are different types of breathing techniques that have been used successfully for women who have been in labor, for incredibly high stress situations, and they also have been proven to have an effect for women sort of mid hot flash to re-regulate breathing and help to reduce their core temperature. So some of this stuff sounds like, oh yeah, whatever, but it sounds like a little soft. It's not a pill, but oftentimes we find the women are really wanting to take advantage of those types of solutions that they can do themselves at home. And I think the key that we find is to be really specific and actionable, and you can't just sort of tell people like eat better, sleep better, exercise more,
breathe more,
practice your breathing. Be a better human. But to really, kind of, what are the things that you think you can commit to? How can we help you get there? How do we provide you with tools and techniques to actually make those changes?
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I recently followed an Instagram page. It has to do with vaginal steaming, and it had a whole article on vaginal steaming being good for menopause. Do you know anything about this?
I have to say I don't know what vaginal steaming is.
Okay.
It hasn't crossed my radar. It wasn't at the North American Menopause Society.
Oh, see? So, a quick, because I don't want to leave the listener or you hanging, like, what the hell is it? Essentially, I looked into it. It's essentially like a box that a woman will sit on without any, lower half undergarments on. And it has a hole in the box, and inside there's like coals, and it steams water, and the steam, they also put essential oils in it and herbs. And so it's apparently ancient Asian, treatment for anything in the vulva, even the anus. And they talk about all this stuff. And at first I was like, this is garbage. Like steaming your vagina, like it's not broccoli.
That is my instinct, I have to say.
Right. But I will give them the credit of the things that they said that the steaming was good for. I could imagine that relaxing the pelvic muscle through heat and steam and lavender helping you breathe and relax. I can imagine the pelvic floor relaxing, and therefore the woman has, less cramps or, less, painful sex because she's more relaxed. So that's not what they said. They said it was the steam and the herbs that cured it. But I think potentially it was just like a relaxing of the muscles, whatever. They also had an article on menopause. If you steam your vagina, please DM us. We want to hear from you. We want to know what's up. If you study it, we want to know. So anyways, it's recently been on my mind.
And if you use a heating pad and smell the lavender oil, maybe that will also help.
It's a quick experiment. We could run this experiment, y'all. We just need let's get 100 women to participate. 50 of y'all are going to steam it. 50 of y'all are going to become your heating pad. Anyways, so is this integrative medicine stuff part of your 360 care plan, or is that something else? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So when a woman comes to Elektra and has a virtual visit with one of our providers, she will go through a HIPAA secure process, share information in an intake, not only about, medical history, just the same sort of standard questions that one does when they go to a new provider, but also what are her goals? What are her symptoms? What does she care most about? What brings her joy? How is she experiencing this phase of life? How does she think about menopause? Because all of that matters to the way in which we'll develop a roadmap for her. Because really the goal is, how do you live well through this phase and into the future. So helping to sort of set those intentions up front, going into the conversation with the provider, and based on what her goals, needs, and preferences are, the conversation will revolve around what can be done to treat, what solutions are available, and what next steps are. And all of that is captured in what we call our 360 care plan. So it's really, an accessible document that, you have here's what we covered, here are the links, here are the resources we talked about. If we discussed supplements, here's what they are. If we talked about, nutrition, here's some specific things. And then, how do we follow up and stay in touch and help you stay accountable to the goals that you've set in that conversation? And so that's something that she receives and can utilize going forward. And it's funny because I don't think I've ever gotten something like that in any of the doctor's visits I've gone to. If you're lucky, you get like an epic printout from the EMR, but that it's a pretty helpful tool.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, our healthcare system's crazy because I had an allergic reaction last year and I went to the ER and they gave me like intravenous Benadryl. And then I like woke up from my nap and they were like, okay, you're good. And I was like, what do I do now? Like also what happened? And like, okay. And I just kind of like left all groggy and stuff. And I was like, what do I, like, what's happening? And it was like, can you please send me home with a little packet,
Totally. Yeah. Totally. And I mean, particularly for this topic, because there's so much education involved, and we can order labs, we can prescribe. And so, spelling out, this is what we've said, these are the instructions. You don't need to sort of worry about taking notes, and our care team is available by text, for follow-up anytime. And so we want to really be that, resource, that responsive, accessible partner.
Yeah, the millennial in me really likes the texting part a lot.
Yeah, it turns out everybody likes texting.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Another thing I saw on your website that I thought was really interesting was that you have the individual consultations, but then you also have these 21-day group programs. What's that about?
Yeah, so we, had the observation that as so much of our visits are around education, and even back to what you were talking about in terms of community, Elektra started in this community forward way, with salons in the homes of our community members. And so this was, in New York, where we're based, and pre-COVID, of course, but bringing experts together with groups of women and having them provide education that without sort of pandering or infantilizing, kind of just everything that you stand for in this podcast, really, like the science in a clear, direct way, treating women as adults. And so that ethos carries over into what we do virtually around group education and giving women a forum in which to learn and to ask questions and to connect with one another, because oftentimes that's where the sort of like, oh, I have that, or I've tried this, or oh, I had this experience with my my OBGYN too, and it was terrible or great. And so that's where the sort of online group programming stems from. And what we do in the 21-day programs is create focus on specific areas. So we focused on sleep and hot flashes and created really specific journeys with actionable tips and education in a text message forward way. So it's sort of like bite-sized and you can do it on your own time. In addition to coming together for a weekly virtual session with a group and with either a physician or a nurse practitioner to dig into, sort of bigger questions and to ask, or cover topics live. And we also did some audio snippets. So sort of, women are so busy in this time of life, kids, parents, work, all the things, pandemic. So how do you really meet them where they are and on their terms? And so we found that that's a really effective way to do that.
I freaking love it. I do not wish menopause upon me anytime soon, but that sounds awesome. I am a huge fan of group anything. Like exercising on my own rarely happens.
Yep.
Get a girlfriend, you
Yep.
know, like to come
Yep.
with me. Even group therapy, you know, I actually hit
Yep.
a barrier in my own individual one-on-one therapy where, you know, I was working on a trauma and, you know, my therapist was saying something that was based in reality. And I would tell her, I believe you, but like, I don't believe you, right? There's something in my head that says it's not true. And it took group therapy for me to hear the stories of other women about the certain topic for me to really like, oh my gosh, all right, it's not just my professional therapist telling me this. This is other women who've lived my experience and all this stuff. A huge, huge supporter of group anything. That's amazing, you know. Also, there was a study once, I have to tell this. I haven't told this yet on the show that there's a study of do you know what the hokey pokey is? You know, when you
I don't.
So there's
Wait,
like,
is it a dance?
yeah. When you're kids, at least in the United States, you stand in a circle and you say, you do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about, right? Well, it turns out they do some brain studies and turns out that like community dance and singing is like tribal and it like helps release serotonin and all the good stuff in your brain. And so one time I was actually in treatment for PTSD and they made us freaking do the hokey pokey every day, which sounds insane. And if my insurance company knew what they were paying for, they may not have supplemented it. But it's true.
They should pay for it if it works. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we should all have more of that in our lives. And
yes, that's like my biggest
and I think you're
with the pandemic.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, you know, what we hear about from women who are in our virtual programs is like they have so much going on. They have a million webinars, but they'll actually make time for this because it feels like self-care and it feels like something they're finally doing for themselves. And, you know, they'll like put on their headphones, shut the door on their family and they're like, okay, this is time to focus on me, my health, my life, connect with other women. And it's, you know, it's fantastic to get to be a part of that journey. And then also for the women who are going through menopause in their 50s or their 60s to also connect with women who are just hitting perimenopause and are like, what's going on? I don't know. I never talked to my mother about it, or maybe I wasn't able to. And to really like have that be part of the group interaction is incredibly powerful.
It is so powerful to mentor, you know, I feel like a lot of times it gives more benefit to the mentor than the mentee when you're like helping someone through something. So that you are providing a gift to the women, really. Well, Jannine, this has been so much fun. I obviously could talk to you for a really long time, but we have two last questions that our listeners love. The first one is that we have a lot of aspiring founders that listen to our show, and they want to know what areas in FemTech still need innovating. So in your opinion, what do you think still needs to be worked on?
Yeah, I mean, all of them, honestly. I think there's so much work to be done to understand how sex and gender differences play into healthcare and wellness for women. I think that it's, you know, obviously, like I'm really biased on what happens to women in their 40s and beyond. I think there's, you know, this is an incredibly rich time of life for women, and we have so much more to understand about, you know, how do we tackle things like dementia and cardiovascular disease that are, you know, leading killers of women. And I think on the R&D side, this has been talked about, but, you know, certainly thinking about prescription medication for women for diseases and conditions that disproportionately affect women is really important. And we also need to think about, you know, new solutions that aren't just sort of specific to, you know, particular anatomy, but a phase of life, I think is really, really important. And I consider perimenopause and menopause prime among them. Because you're, you know, sort of opening up a chapter to the next third of your life. And we need lots of innovation and inspiration in that space. And I'm really thrilled to be a part of that journey.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And then our last question is, what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
I think the femtech industry is growing quickly, but it's still nascent in many ways. I think it's become a little bit of a like sexy talking point, but where is the action? I think my co-founder has puts this really well, where it's sometimes like a pool party and the first person doesn't want to jump in. But once you get, and like all things where it's new or different, you need someone to like have the courage, whether that's as an investor or as a partner, to be willing to experiment. I think it would help if we had more data on, specifically focused on women experiencing symptoms, what treatments work best for, certain conditions, the cost. Certainly in menopause, there's very little in the US around the economic and healthcare costs of menopause, the burden on society, and the UK and Canada are actually much further ahead in this way, and that really helps to build the case for why we need investment, because it ultimately reduces the risk of poor health later in life. It leads to better quality of health and improves the healthcare system overall. So having the data and the investment to follow it, I think are, two crucial things, but keeping the attention on it is really important. Yeah. Just in menopause alone, having Michelle Obama talk about menopause from one of the best and brightest platforms we have out there in society is great. And I just want to, I'll quote one thing from it because I would love for everyone to listen. She said, it's an important thing to take up space in our society. 50% of us will go through this and we're living like it's not happening. And I think that's just a, fantastic way of saying we've got to keep the attention and the conversation on the space.
Michelle, if you're listening, please be my friend and please be on the show. Really.
Me too.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. Well, Jannine, thank you so much for your time today. You are doing really important work, and we at FemTech Focus cannot wait to see what happens next for you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.